Hi everybody, it's me, Giggles, and I just have to say, if you like the Lily Madwhip series featuring myself, which you must since you're here for this episode, be sure to check out the novel by Will Dolphin, available now on Amazon, on Kindle, and paperback. Not only is it a great way to keep something from your favorite series, but it's also a wonderful way to support the author. And now, on to tonight's story. Roger sat like a bump on a log outside the hotel room we'd just broken into. He seemed deflated, like one of those punching bag clowns that pops back up after you hit it that someone left out in the sun and the plastic melted and the clown turned into a happy-looking pile of ice cream. Black smoke trickled out of the cut on his face. "I don't understand," I said, pulling on his pant leg with my little stuffed cat paws. "What does that Pokemon card have to do with you tracking Lily?" Roger stared through me at something on the ground.
We've both touched the card. It was a connection. Like one of those telephones you make with the two cans and a piece of string. Imagine you're holding onto one of those cans and following the string to the person on the other end. Except now, we get to the other can and there's nobody on the other end anymore. She doesn't have anything else that has a connection like it.
"We should call the police," I squeaked.
And tell them what? A dead kid and a haunted doll want to report that the dead kid's possessed sister murdered some guy in a hotel parking lot and is currently on the lam with the potential to unleash hell? What are they going to do? Drive over here and shoot me, probably.
"Lily is riding a lamb?" I asked in disbelief. It didn't make sense. I knew you were much too big to ride a little itty-bitty lamb. Roger wrinkled his forehead up for a moment, and then he shook his head and went back to studying the pavement. I looked around at the hotel and its parking lot. Everything is so much bigger when you're small. The cars were like Jack and the Beanstalk sized. Lily could be anywhere. She might even be in Egypt by now, I thought. Down a ways, the door to room 29 opened and a man in a blue bathrobe came out carrying a bucket. He whistled quietly until he noticed Roger slouched against the wall and then said, "Excuse me," and stepped over his legs. There was one of those ice machines just a few doors down, and he busied himself scooping ice into the bucket, occasionally glancing at Roger and even once at me, and then walked on past again without a word and back into his room. If he'd looked in the other direction, he might have noticed the dead guy slumped over in the steering wheel of his car. "Hey!" I said, tugging at Roger's pant leg. "What about the dead guy? Can you talk to him? Maybe he knows which direction Lily went."
He's dead, Brainiac,
Roger said glumly.
He's probably trapped in that slowly cooling body like I was. He can't say or do anything. It's like limbo.
"You mean when they play music and you have to dance under the stick without falling over?" Roger stood up and brushed himself off.
You know what? I'll go talk to the dead guy if you promise not to open your bleeping mouth anymore.
"Well, I can't actually open my bleeping mouth anyway." I couldn't believe I used the F word. I ran around in a little circle trying to shake off the dirtiness I felt. Roger went over to the car and leaned in the window. From where I was, it looked like he was trying to adjust the dead man's necktie. After a moment, I saw the wisping black smoke that was coming out of the cut on his cheeks suddenly start pouring out of his face like a waterfall. It billowed in the air briefly and then disappeared into the window of the car. At the same time, Roger went limp and collapsed to the ground like a wet rag. I ran over to check on him. His eyes were open, but he wasn't blinking. His mouth was open, too. He looked dead. I shook him. "Roger?"
Leave the body alone,
came a man's voice from the car. I looked up and the dead guy was leaning out of the window, looking down at me. His eyes were milky-colored, but they blinked at me. There was a big, open gash on his neck. It was deep. Some dark blood ran out of it and down the outside of the car. It was so gross, I had to look away.
"It'll just be a sec,"
said the dead man.
"This guy's like an undercover cop or something. He's got a police radio in here and... Whoa, check this out."
He disappeared back into the car. I heard some thumping and banging coming from inside and wondered what he was doing in there. After a moment, something big, long, and heavy-looking fell out of the window where it bounced off the car in the next parking space and then landed on Roger's body. I found myself looking down at the barrel of a shotgun.
"Hello?"
the dead man said from inside the car. "Hello?" I said back to him. There came a crackle of static. "Who is this, please?" said a staticky female voice.
"Hello,"
Roger repeated. I could hear him pop open the glove box and then uncrinkling some paper or something. A light flipped on inside the car.
This is Henderson at the Red Moon. I need an all points bulletin, I think. An APB on Lily and Madwhip. Age, 10, I think.
I realized he wasn't talking to me. He must have been on the police radio talking to their headquarters. Another angry, crackly voice cut in from the other side of the airwaves.
Frank, it's Andy. What are you doing? I told you to stay off the radio. Use the walkie I gave you.
More sounds of hurried movements came from inside the car. I could hear Roger muttering to himself. I wished that I could see what was going on, but I couldn't. It made me so frustrated and annoyed being so small and useless that I sat there for a while just smacking the lifeless face of Roger's body on the ground. It felt kind of therapeutic, like when you use a baseball bat on one of those inflatable clowns that bounces back up after you hit it. And then I got an idea. If Roger could do it, maybe I could too. Maybe I'm just black smoke trapped inside a teddy cat body. So I felt around on myself until I found a loose stitch, and I ran over to the car next to the one with Roger as dead Frank in it. There is a sharp bit on the underside of the car door, and I rubbed against it until I felt the stitching snag. And then I pulled and pulled until I heard the distinct sound of fabric ripped and felt my head and neck go loose and my vision went sideways. Dead Frank was on the walkie-talkie with whoever Andy was.
I've lost the Madwhip girl,
he said frantically.
She's on the loose. I think she might be dangerous. Lily Madwhip is not a danger, Frank.
Andy's voice crackled.
She is in danger. You need to find where she went pronto. And because you went giving your location on the wire, the person who's hunting her may already be on their way to you right now.
Dead Frank leaned out of the window and snorted, causing blood to spray into the air.
He's talking about us.
He laughed.
He thinks we're trying to kill her. I told you they'd misunderstand the situation.
He glanced down at me.
What the bleep happened to you?
I didn't have time to reply. I could feel myself slipping out of my body. Except it wasn't a body. It was just a bunch of stuffing and thread and 2 plastic eyeballs. The world became a blur, like I was looking through one of those kaleidoscopes and I could see in every direction. There was the night sky, there was dead Frank's face, there was Roger's lifeless face. And that's where I was going.
What the bleep are you doing?
I heard dead Frank shout.
Get away from there!
And then it was like going down one of those water slides at an amusement park. I could feel a cold, wet sensation go through me, and everything went dark, and then brightened again. I blinked. I could blink! I had eyes and could blink! I cleared my throat. Ahem. My voice sounded weird. I knew I was in Roger, but in my head I could hear myself, and coming out of my mouth was Roger's voice.
Oh man, that's going to be hard to get used to,
I said, and then laughed at my voice. Dead Frank was glaring down at me.
Get the bleep out of my body,
he said in as stern a voice as he could muster for a guy with his throat slashed open.
Now.
I sat up. My upper body felt heavier, and it was surreal to have elbows and fingers after getting used to the stuffed paws and no joints. Standing was even harder, especially because as I tried to do it, I felt hands, dead Frank's hands, pushing on the top of my head, trying to make me sit back down.
Frank!
Crackled whoever Andy was.
I'm on my way, do you copy? Frank!
Gut. Dead Frank grunted, leaning halfway out of the car window and almost putting all of his weight on my now shaggy head.
Back in your stupid toy body.
I fought back. I didn't want to go back into that tiny body. I want to be useful in more ways than just getting carried around and told to set things on fire. I yelled at him. And we don't have time for this. That guy Andy's coming. Didn't you hear him? We need to go and find Lily! Dead Frank finally stopped pushing on my head and wormed his way back into the car. I could feel my hair was wet from where he'd been practically draping himself over me, and I had a nasty feeling it was blood in my hair. I mean, Roger's hair. Gross. Dead guy blood in our hair. Dead Frank started cursing so heavily that I don't even want to write it all down here. Let's just put one big bleep, and that sums it up. After a minute of having a tantrum, he clambered out of the car, falling onto his hands and knees. As he got up, he grabbed the shotgun and pointed it at me for a second. I wasn't too scared of him shooting me with it since I was already dead and I could just go back into the stuffed cat. You'd only be hurting yourself, I pointed out. Dead Frank shook his head, cursed again, and then headed back toward our car where the jug of holy water was.
Come on,
he snapped. I ran after him. At the Firebird, Dead Frank popped open the driver's side door, glanced in for a moment, and then shrugged and slid into the seat. When I opened the passenger side door, though, the world seemed to disappear. Instead of the inside of the car, there was this dimly lit hallway full of other doors, all of them shaped like car doors with handles and latches and even windows, though the windows were all dark and I couldn't see through them.
This doesn't look right,
I said.
Shut up, idiot!
I could hear Dead Frank growling from the side of the door I was on. On the side with the hallway, though, there was a different sound, like footsteps on stone. I shut the door. Dead Frank was glaring at me again from inside the car.
You can't open any doors in that construct, do you hear me?
He said angrily.
It's linked to the veil. You have to find other ways to get in places, or let me open the doors.
He leaned across the inside of the car and popped the door open for me.
Now, hurry up and get in.
I slid into the car and shut the door. Dead Frank, revved the engine, then hit the gas and tore out of the parking lot like a maniac. He whipped out onto the road. Fishtailing, I think is the word, where the back end flies out past the front like a doggy that's running too fast, you know? Maybe they should call it dogtailing. I don't know too many fish that go so fast their butts get ahead of them. Well, anyway, we did that and knocked over a trash can, spilling trash all over the sidewalk and street.
When this is over, I get that body back. Do you hear me, you little bleep?
Dead Frank snarled at me. His face was all pale, probably because he was running out of blood. His eyes were still milky white and his shirt was soaked with his own blood. I was terrified to look at him, honestly. It was kind of like being stuck in a nightmare. Have you ever had one of those nightmares, Lily? Where you're in a Firebird in your dead brother's body and his ghost has possessed the corpse of a dead policeman and you're driving away from the Red Moon Hotel in the middle of the night on the hunt for yourself before demons use your body to turn the whole world into a new hell? Me neither, actually, but I think from now on I will have that nightmare. Where are you, Lily? Where did you go? We need to find you. I didn't even believe that you killed Dead Frank, but who else would have? Why was Dead Frank watching your room? Did that detective man we saw that morning put him there? I had another thought.
If you want, we could pull over and swap bodies,
I suggested. Dead Frank didn't even think about it for a while. He just shook his head.
No. I'm not going to bleep things up by letting some Cupid doll be in control of the adult body. What if we run into this guy's coworkers? You'd talk like a 10-year-old girl and our cover would be blown.
I think the moment they see that nasty gash in your throat is when our cover will be blown, I pointed out. It really was gross. I wished he'd cover it somehow.
Yeah, well, the other problem is he's still in here. This Frank guy. His soul is still in here. I'm kind of sitting on it.
I looked down at where he was sitting, but I couldn't see anything. He noticed my look.
Non-physically moron?
He sighed.
Like, I'm suppressing him. It's easy because he's dead. When you die, I know what happens when you die, stupid.
I couldn't believe I just used the S word to someone. Dead Frank looked shocked for a second.
Look at you, getting all mean. My body's rubbing off on you, I think.
I didn't like that thought. Also, his legs and the back of his neck were always itchy. Is that normal for boys? The longer I sat there, the more things itched. If we sat in the car for an hour, I thought I might turn into one giant itch. We drove in silence for a while. Where are we going? I finally asked.
Right now, just a good distance from that damned hotel. We need to lay low and let me get my bearings,
Dead Frank said. He squinted, trying to see. I imagine it must have been difficult with his eyes all fogged up. He rubbed them with his fists, but it didn't seem to help.
Hang on, there's a place nearby. It's been abandoned for years. We should be good there. Just gotta stay out of sight while I figure out what to do.
The place was an old gas station. The pumps out front were rusty, and whatever company brand it was, the sign was missing. Maybe somebody stole it. There was a small shop with the windows boarded up. We drove behind it and parked, turning off all the lights in the car engine. Dead Frank got out and stretched. His joints all made nasty cracking sounds. He rotated his head in a small circle and I could see more blood oozing from his wound. I turned to barf and banged my head on the passenger side window. Ugh. Fortunately, there was no actual barf in Roger's body, so I just dry heaved and choked on my tongue for a moment. It really took some getting used to being back in a body. You don't have to breathe when you're in a stuffed animal.
What's this?
Dead Frank was kneeling down and looking at something on the ground. I started to climb out of the driver's side window, but my long human legs got caught on the steering wheel. Dead Frank continued to look at the ground, ignoring my plight.
Hey, Nancy Drew, get over here,
he said before looking up as he heard me finally tumbling out onto the pavement.
Oh, I guess you'd be Joe Hardy now.
I didn't know what he was referencing, but I didn't have time to ask him. The thing he was looking at on the ground was a weird-shaped knife. It kind of looked like a letter opener my real dad, had in his office. The handle was made of leather or something like it. But what was really weird about it was that the blade was covered in blood.
Dude,
Dead Frank whispered.
This looks like some sort of sacrificial dagger. Look at the blood on this thing. It's fresh. There's something going on here, like cult activity or something. Why is it here on the ground?
I whispered back.
Do you think the cult uses this old gas station for cult activities? Also, why are we whispering?
Dead Frank's head shot up. He looked around wildly. There was nothing. Somewhere, cars were driving by, but too far for their lights to be seen. An owl made an owl sound. Peepers were peeping in the grass of a nearby field. A ghost was moaning. Wait, a ghost was moaning?
Do you hear that?
Dead Frank whispered.
Are you talking about the owl, the peepers, or the ghost?
I whispered back. We both stood up and looked around. Dead Frank handed me the sacrificial dagger with the blood on it, and then he ran over to the car, climbed in the window, and came back with the shotgun. He pumped the handle and then closed his eyes and smiled to himself.
I've always wanted to do that.
But where is the sound coming from? I asked. My knees were shaking and bonking together. Dead Frank frowned at me.
Stop making me look like a wimp. You're already a ghost. Nothing here can hurt you. Grow a pair.
The sound seemed to be coming from the car wash. Maybe someone went in the car wash when it was working and got stuck in the spinning brushes and ground up into mincemeat. Maybe they drove through in a car with the sunroof open and drowned. And then I thought how funny it was that we were two ghosts going into a haunted car wash and acting afraid of another ghost. Maybe we'll all just sit back and chat about ghost things, like what it's like to be made of smoke and be able to possess bodies and haunt car washes. We peeked around the entrance and into the place where the cars sat and got cleaned. It was dark inside the car wash. We couldn't see anything, especially Dead Frank with his fogged-up eyes. I could just make out a silhouette of something. It looked like a very short ghost with tiny legs. It moaned. Dead Frank pulled me back around the corner.
I think we might have scared the cultists off when they heard us pulling into the gas station. They dropped their sacrificial dagger and left their sacrifice half done in the car wash.
What do we do? I asked. Should we call the police?
What's with you and calling the cops every time something weird happens?
Well, how are we gonna help the sacrifice person? The sacrifice person moaned. They sounded like they were in a lot of pain. I wish I could put the blood from the knife I was holding back in their body and unstab or unslice them, whatever it was that the cultists did to them.
I'll go in and get them. You wait outside in case the cultists come back.
He took the knife from me and stuck it into one of my belt loops, and then he handed me the shotgun.
I've already pumped it.
He pushed the barrel out of his face.
Keep your finger off the trigger and point that bad boy away from your own face for bleep's sake.
My hands were trembling. I watched him disappear into the car wash. Suddenly, the night got very quiet. The peepers weren't peeping anymore. I could hear Dead Frank whispering to the sacrifice person. Hey! The person moaned. Help! It sounded like a child.
I'm gonna get you out of here,
Dead Frank said.
Are they close? The people who did this to you?
I'm bleeding. I looked down at the dagger in my belt loop and felt ashamed for having it. Well, actually, what if somebody came by and saw me with the gun and the bloody knife? I might end up doing life in prison, which would be crazy because I don't know if I could die in this Roger body. And if I do die in Roger's body, does that make me Roger? Dead Frank appeared at the entrance to the car wash. The sacrificed person was cradled in his arms. It was a young girl. She was dressed in fuzzy white pajamas and... Dude! I said excitedly to Dead Frank. That's Lily! Dead Frank looked down at his sister in his arms.
Well, bleep! This just got a whole lot easier.
Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I want to tell you thanks so much for watching tonight's video or listening to tonight's episode of the podcast. Quick reminder, I am also a narrator over at Chilling. If you guys like the stories that you're listening to here, then I'm sure you'll like the stories that you can listen to over at Chilling, because they're almost the same thing. I'm still narrating them, but you can select your own background music or background sounds, and you can select a whole mess of other narrators, such as Autumn Ivy, Swamp Dweller, and a bunch of my other friends. If you guys are interested in checking out Chilling app, starting up with a free trial, you can use the link in the description down below. Or you can head over to thechillingapp.com and also use those free trials to win prizes from their giveaways. And as always, I would love to give a big thank you to everyone who's supporting me over on Patreon. You guys are the real MVPs. You guys keep things going, especially while things have been nuts for me over the past couple of months, and things have been getting crazier and crazier as time goes on. You guys are the ones who are keeping me sane, and I mean that with all sincerity, that you guys have helped me immensely. So, in my personal life and my professional life, I want to give a very big thank you to Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Jakob Fenske, Burnett, Kraus, LaQueda, Canizales, MrCreepyPasta, PebisPleaser, Joseph Calarrudo, BuddhaBee, Dante Kinkade, Foxhound 803, Mephistopheles, CursepoxPrimarch, Bastion Beefcake, Jeff the Killer's Cultist, Love You M, INSANITYGamerX, Jesus Cornejo, Yarghoul, kearns, himbojerry, SamaHigh, Crusader Jakob, Adamarius, Captain Scurvy, Espadine, Braden Morris, Nate Cull, Our Minsect Time, Angelus, Seclude, That Creepy Chick, Red Shadow Cat, Xavier and Cheyenne, 6 Gay Rats in a Trench Coat, Turtleman, Cryolinium, Lord Life's Best, Goring Trimagazine, Mr. Marcus Blitz, Michael Limshock, Dirk Diver 030, Matt Bach, Voice of Sand, Shelly J, Fikamel, Deleted Account, Melted Lake, Tully Sue, William King, Sashi Suzaku, Stricken, Freddy Krueger, Happy Birthday Jason Wilson, Lisa Cottrell, Caspian, Hades Nephew, Tater Chip, Acid System, Mog, Kiri the Sloth, Fester's Lampshade, Nico Kaya, The Ginger Bros, and Stormcrow, Daniel Polson, and Corey Kenshin. To everyone on this list, everyone in the description, and of course anyone who could support even just $1, thank you all so much for making my life significantly easier with this. And if you guys would like to be able to join any of the names that you see here or down there or anything at all, head over to patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta. And with that, I wish you all a very, very pleasant night and sweet dreams.